Pursuant to House Resolution 1370, the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From day one of this regime, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris declared an all-out war on American energy production and exploration. They have made very clear that they care more about appeasing the radical climate change activists than protecting the millions of oil and gas workers and producers in America. I was disappointed but not surprised when the Biden regime finalized the rule entitled Fluid Mineral Lease and Leasing Process, which mandates provisions from the partisan so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which increased the royalty rate for production on federal lands while also increasing and creating new fees for domestic energy producers. This new fluid mineral leasing rule is further proof that the Biden-Harris regime is using every tool in their administration to dismantle American energy production. It increases bonding levels for production on federal lands and proposes ending nationwide bonding and increasing the minimum bond amounts for individual lease bonds and statewide lease bonds from $10,000 to $150,000 and from $25,000 to $500,000, respectively. This significant increase will tie up capital that would otherwise be put back into production and is unjustifiable as there are only 37 orphaned oil and gas wells on BLM-managed lands. These increases will impact smaller producers who can't afford to operate in the market. These additional fees will ultimately harm returns and reduce revenues to state and local governments by disincentivizing development on federal lands. The rule also introduces the idea of using preference criteria to inform the BLM selection of lands for lease sales. BLM's rationale for this change is to avoid conflict in areas, quote, with sensitive cultural, wildlife, and recreation resources, end quote. This means that BLM field offices could avoid leasing in all areas with endangered or threatened species, critical habitat, or nearby recreation areas, a move that would greatly limit leasing on our federal lands. With the wars happening in the Middle East and in Europe, and with OPEC significantly lowering oil production, we cannot rely on other foreign nations to control our energy supply. America makes the cleanest energy in the world. We do it the most responsibly. American innovation, in particular fracking, has allowed America to be the global leader in reducing emissions since the year 2000. We need to stop buying oil and gas from Russia, stop begging OPEC, Venezuela, and Iran to produce energy for us, and start producing more energy responsibly here in America. I am ready to bring back the American roughneck and to drill, baby, drill, because no one does it better than we do here in the United States of America. We must restore American energy dominance and produce clean, reliable energy right here in America. Mr. Chair, I urge the adoption of my amendment, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves.
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
And first and foremost, I do not believe that the United States government purchases oil from Russia. We have sanctions against them, and we do not purchase oil from Iran. Mr. Chair, this amendment is one more controversial poison pill writer that sadly shows the extremist Republicans are not interested in bills that can gain bipartisan support and become law. The Fluid Mineral Lease and Leasing Program rules revises outdated. These haven't been updated for years, and it's our responsibility to make sure the taxpayers get a good return on our natural resources when they're put out to lease. So what this tries to do is just update these outdated fiscal terms on offshore leases, oil, gas program, including bonding requirements to protect taxpayers, royalty rates, and minimum bids to make sure that U.S. taxpayers receive a fair amount for their public lands when they're used as lease materials. The rule aims to increase the returns to the American taxpayers. I can't say this enough. It's to make sure that taxpayers are getting a fair shake, that they're assured of a fair return from the extraction of natural resources on public lands, and to discourage speculators and improve responsible stewardship as directed by Congress. Now, we're here to protect the cultural and natural resources of our public lands for future generations. And that means when they go out to bid, that we make sure that the royalty rates and the minimum bids serve the taxpayers well, and bonding requirements to protect taxpayers are put in place. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I would like to yield the remainder of my time to my colleague, Mr. Simpson from Idaho.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the lady for yielding. I rise in support of the amendment. This administration continues to put out rulemakings that seek to attack American energy producers with burdensome costs and regulations. These new costs will ultimately be passed along to consumers, driving up energy costs for American families and further shifting production to countries that are not our friends. We must utilize an all-of-the-above energy approach to energy production and stop hampering domestic energy production. It would be interesting to note that in the year 2020, we were actually energy independent in this country. We are no longer. And yet we have the energy here in this country, but we refuse to use it. Therefore, I support the gentlewoman's amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentlelady is recognized.
I would like to reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves.
Mr. Chair, I yield.
Mr. Chair, I want to state another fact for the record. When we extract oil and natural gas out of public lands, it's sold on a global market. So when it's sold to other folks. So if we're running into energy independence challenges, as was pointed out, part of that's because it's sold on the global market. I also want to point out, for the record, it's been almost 4 decades, since the taxpayers have had bonding requirements, royalty rates, and minimum bids looked at to make sure that they're protected. Let me close with this. Once again, my Republican colleagues are disregarding the law and trying to circumvent rigorous practices to put the rules up to date. And nullify public comments also happens with this amendment. We just can't close our eyes to the impacts of climate change that we're experiencing as our country, our health, our livelihoods, food security, and quality of life all depend upon a healthy ecosystem. And I urge my colleagues to reject this amendment and focus instead on addressing climate change and being good stewards of our public lands and resources for the benefits of future generations. And that means refreshing and updating almost 40-year-old oil, gas, and mineral leasing. With that, I yield back.
The question is on